My name is Grace, I'm 58 years old, and I never imagined that an ordinary Tuesday would become the day that divided my life into before and after. I've been a nurse for 35 years at City General Hospital, always the woman who arrived early and left late, taking care of everyone except myself. That day, I left early because a colleague covered my shift. She said I looked too tired, and she was right. When I opened the front gate, I felt something strange in the air. Robert's car was in the garage, but he should have been at the auto shop until 7. I thought maybe he'd gotten sick, so I rushed up the stairs, worried. That's when I heard it. Moaning. Sounds I knew well, but hadn't heard coming from our bedroom in months. My heart raced and my legs went weak. I walked slowly down the hallway, each step echoing like thunder in my head. The door to our bedroom, the bedroom I tidied every day, where I embroidered the pillowcases he called old lady stuff, was slightly open. And then I saw. Robert, my husband of 30 years, was in our bed with a blonde woman. She was much younger, maybe in her early 30s, with that fair skin he always praised in TV actresses. They were so involved they didn't even notice my presence. But the shock wasn't just from the betrayal. The real punch to the gut was when I recognized who she was. Ashley. Margaret's daughter, my neighbor. The same Ashley who greeted me at the gate with fake smiles, who always made comments about how I looked good for my age, or asked if I ever thought about straightening my hair to look more polished. The same one who, at neighborhood gatherings, treated me like I was invisible, talking over me as if my words had no value. I backed away silently, my hands shaking uncontrollably. 30 years of marriage. 30 years of taking care of him when he was sick, getting up at dawn to pack his lunch, enduring comments from his family about how he could have chosen better, or how I was lucky to have found a hard-working man, being who I was. I went down the stairs like a sleepwalker, each step taking me deeper into a hole I didn't even know existed. I sat in the kitchen, looking at the photos on the refrigerator, our honeymoon in Niagara Falls, anniversaries, family parties where I was always serving, never seated at the table as a guest. The sound of moaning still echoed in my head when I realized something that made me feel a strange mixture of pain and relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about pleasing anyone. I wasn't thinking about what to make him for dinner or whether I'd ironed enough clothes for the week. I was thinking about who Grace was behind all those years of dedication that were never truly valued. And for the first time, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Anger. A clean, crystalline anger that began to burn slowly in my chest. They had no idea what was coming. Sitting in that kitchen I cleaned religiously every day. I began to see my life with painful clarity. For 30 years I had been the perfect wife by the standards imposed on me. Quiet, servile, grateful. At Robert's family gatherings I was always the Grace. Never just Grace. As if my name needed an article to be remembered. As if I were a piece of furniture. I remembered the countless times his sisters made comments about my natural hair. "Oh, Grace, have you ever thought about getting it straightened? You'd look so much more put together." Or when they praised my cooking saying, "Wow, you really cook well, you must have learned from a young age, right?" As if it were impossible for a black woman to cook well through talent and not racial instinct. I always smiled and agreed. Always. Because I was taught that's what women like me should do to keep the peace, and be grateful for what we had. Robert never defended me. He just sat there drinking his beer, sometimes even laughing along when the comment was funnier. Looking at the photos on the refrigerator now, I saw all the signs I chose to ignore. How he looked away when I tried to talk about our plans, how our intimacy gradually cooled, how he came home later and later because of work. How many times did he come home smelling of different perfume and I believed it was from some customer at the shop. But what hurt most wasn't just the lies. It was realizing how I had become invisible in my own life. I worked 10 hours a day at the hospital, caring for dozens of patients, making important medical decisions, being respected by colleagues and doctors. But at home I was just Robert's wife, the one who warmed up food and didn't ask questions. You who are watching, especially you women, how many of us haven't been through this? Did you identify with that feeling of being seen only as supporting characters in your own story? If so, subscribe to this channel, because this story will show that it's never too late to reclaim our leading role. Never. I was lost in these thoughts when I heard low laughter coming from upstairs. They were coming down the stairs, talking in whispers, as if sharing delicious secrets. My stomach tightened. In a few seconds, Robert would appear in the kitchen, probably with that fake smile I knew so well, pretending he had just arrived from work. At that moment, I had to make a decision that would change everything. Confront him right then and burst into tears like the betrayed wife everyone would expect me to be, or do something different. Something that the strategic and intelligent nurse I had always been, but never could show at home, would finally do. I took a deep breath, adjusted my uniform, and decided that Robert and Ashley had no idea who they were messing with. They were about to discover that underestimating a 58-year-old black woman was the biggest mistake of their lives. The sound of conversation was getting closer. It was time to start acting. The sound of footsteps approached, and I quickly stood up, pretending to organize the spices in the cupboard. My heart was beating irregularly, but my expression remained serene. 35 years of being a nurse taught me to stay calm under pressure, even when everything was falling apart inside. Robert appeared in the kitchen with that rehearsed smile I now recognized perfectly. His hair was slightly messy, and there was a scratch on his neck that he tried to hide with his shirt collar. "Hi, honey. I got home early today, had to come get some tools I forgot," he said, kissing my forehead as he had for years. The same automatic, loveless kiss that I always interpreted as marital affection. "That's nice, honey," I replied in the most natural voice possible, while observing every detail. There were blonde hairs stuck to his plaid shirt, hairs that definitely weren't mine. Ashley's sweet, cloying perfume still permeated his clothes, mixed with the smell of sweat and other things I preferred not to identify. "Are you having dinner at home today?" I asked, testing how far his ability to lie to my face would go. "Oh, I don't know yet, I might work late. You know how it is, right? I need to make up for lost time," he replied, avoiding my gaze while getting a glass of water. Lie number 2. Or was it the 3rd? I had already lost count. I continued pretending normalcy, asking about work, commenting on the weather, doing exactly what I always did. Being the understanding wife who doesn't question, who believes, who makes her husband's life easier. Except now, every word that came out of my mouth had a different purpose. I was collecting information. When he went to shower, I took the opportunity to examine his clothes with a clinical eye. Besides the obvious blonde hairs, there was a light pink lipstick stain on his shirt collar. Exactly the color Ashley always wore. And in his jeans pocket, my fingers found something that made my blood freeze. A note folded on pink perfumed paper. In delicate feminine handwriting it read, "My love, I can't stand pretending you're just the neighbor's husband anymore. When are we going to stop this charade? I love you, eh?" With trembling hands I continued reading. "P.S. She doesn't suspect anything, poor thing. So naive. Or maybe just stupid. Ha ha." That was like a slap in the face. Not only were they betraying me, they were laughing at my supposed ignorance. Ashley thought I was stupid. Stupid. Me, who saved lives, who graduated working during the day and studying at night, who created care strategies that other nurses copied. I put the note back exactly where it was and returned to the kitchen. When Robert came down, freshly showered and fragrant, I continued playing my role as a devoted wife. I offered him a snack, asked if he needed anything, smiled when he said he might be late. "That's fine, honey. You know I trust you," I said, looking directly into his eyes. And for the first time in 30 years, I saw Robert squirm uncomfortably under my direct gaze. Interesting. After he left, I sat back in the kitchen and began to plan. It wasn't going to be an emotional explosion. It wasn't going to be screaming. It was going to be something much more effective. Pure strategy. They wanted to play games with me. Perfect. But they didn't know they were playing with someone who had spent decades making life-or-death decisions under pressure. Robert and Ashley were about to discover that there's a big difference between being patient and being a fool. And that difference was about to become very, very clear. The next morning, Robert left early for the shop, as always. Or at least that's what he said. I waited about 20 minutes and then did something I had never done in 30 years of marriage. I searched through his things. Not out of jealousy, but with the precision of a nurse collecting data for a diagnosis. I started with his dresser drawer. Among the bunched-up socks and old underwear, I found condoms, a different brand from the ones we used years ago, when we still had intimacy. The box was half empty. My mind calculated quickly. Robert had had a vasectomy 10 years ago. Why the hell would he need condoms? In the closet, among his work shirts, I found a dress shirt I had never seen. Elegant, expensive, with the tag still attached. It wasn't the type of clothing he would wear to the shop. In the inner pocket, more evidence. 2 movie tickets for a film I had asked to watch together. He said it wasn't his type of movie. Apparently, it became his type when the company changed. But the real treasure was on the phone he left charging on the living room table. Robert was never very smart with technology, so the password was obvious. My birthday. At least he hadn't changed that yet. What I saw in the messages made me sit heavily on the couch. Months and months of conversations with Ashley. Intimate photos of her that I won't describe out of decency. And worse, messages where they talked about me. She doesn't suspect anything, poor thing. She's there making little meals, doing laundry, all happy in her ignorance, Ashley wrote. Yeah, huh. Sometimes I even feel sorry for her. But what can you do, right? So, I don't know, boring. You're everything she's not, young, beautiful, fun, Robert replied. I continued reading, each word like a stab. They made jokes about my work. Imagine, she saves lives at the hospital but can't even save her own marriage, ha ha ha. About my appearance. That nappy hair of hers gives me the creeps. Thank God you have those beautiful golden curls. About my personality. She's so uptight, so boring. With you I can be myself. But the message that hurt me most wasn't about me. It was their plan. Robert was withdrawing money little by little from our joint account. The account where I had been religiously depositing my salary for 3 decades. They were planning to run away together to Miami, where Ashley had a cousin who could get Robert a job. Just 2 more months and we'll be free from this boring life. I'll leave a little note explaining everything, poor Grace. But she'll be fine, she's strong, she'll manage, wrote my husband, as if he were talking about discarding old furniture. Ashley replied, I hope she doesn't make a scene. These older black women sometimes get hysterical when they're left. There it was. The blatant racism I had always suspected, but never had concrete proof of. Ashley didn't see me as a person who deserved respect. To her, I was just an older black woman who could get hysterical. I photographed everything. Every message, every photo, every proof of betrayal and prejudice. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. It was steady, determined. The nurse in me had taken control, and when that happened, I became relentless. I put the phone back exactly where it was and went to the kitchen to prepare his lunch, as I always did. But while peeling potatoes, my mind was already 3 steps ahead, planning every move of my revenge. Robert and Ashley wanted to see me as a hysterical, older black woman. Perfect. They were about to discover that there's something much worse than a hysterical woman. An intelligent woman who is absolutely calm and in control of the situation. The game had changed levels, and they had no idea I had just seen all their cards. That night, after Robert left for another one of his lying overtime sessions, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and began planning like a complex surgery. In 35 years of nursing, I learned that the best results come from meticulous preparation, not impulsiveness. First, I analyzed their pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Robert worked late. Always at the same time. He left home at 6:30 p.m. and returned at 10 p.m. Ashley posted photos on Instagram on those same days, always at home, relaxing with wine. Amateur liars. Then I studied the messages I had photographed. They met at Ashley's house. Her mother traveled a lot for work, leaving the house empty. And Robert always brought his lubricant because, according to his own romantic words, he wanted it to be special every time. What a gentleman. That's when my clinical mind began to work. I knew substances. I spent my days dealing with medications, surgical adhesives, hospital materials. And I knew something very specific. Cyanoacrylate surgical glue. We used it to close small cuts in the emergency room. It was transparent, viscous, and stuck instantly to skin with heat and moisture. The idea was diabolical and perfect. The next day, I stopped by the hospital pharmacy and borrowed a tube of surgical glue. It wasn't stealing. I always took materials home when a neighbor got hurt. Only this time, the wound I was going to treat was to my pride. I studied Robert's lubricant bottle. Same format, same viscous consistency. It would be easy to make the switch. The glue stuck on contact with mucous membranes and moisture. Exactly the conditions they would create. It wasn't dangerous, but it would be memorable and very, very embarrassing. You who are watching, especially you women, how many times have you felt underestimated for being just nurses or just teachers or just any profession that requires intelligence but doesn't receive the recognition it deserves? If you've been through this, leave a like here and tell in the comments how you dealt with people who underestimated you. Because this story is about showing that knowledge is power, and power well used is justice. I tested my theory on a small sample. The glue really looked identical to the lubricant. Perfect. Now I just had to wait for the right moment. Robert came home that Thursday all excited, whistling softly. He took a careful shower, put on cologne, the same one I had been smelling on him for months and always attributed to cleaning products from the shop. How naive I was. I'm going to work late today, honey. Difficult customer, you know how it is, he said, kissing my forehead absent-mindedly. Of course, honey. Good luck with the work, I replied, emphasizing the last word in a way he didn't notice, but which gave me immense satisfaction. I waited for him to leave. I waited another 20 minutes for safety. Then I went up to our room and made the switch. The lubricant bottle went in the trash, and in its place was my special gift for the couple. Same format, same color, same packaging. I went down to the living room and turned on the television, pretending to watch a soap opera. But my mind was calculating. How long would it take for them to notice the problem? How long to panic? And mainly, how long until they needed outside help? The clock showed 7:15 p.m. Somewhere in the city, Robert and Ashley were about to discover that playing with an intelligent woman's feelings has consequences. And I was there, calmly knitting a scarf, waiting for my phone to ring. Because it was going to ring. Oh, it was. It was exactly 8:47 p.m. when my phone rang. I was in the living room, pretending to watch the 8 o'clock soap opera, but actually counting the minutes. I looked at the screen. Ashley, neighbor. I took a deep breath, let it ring 3 times so I wouldn't seem like I was waiting, and answered with the most innocent voice I could manage. Hello, Ashley. Everything okay, dear? From the other side of the line, a desperate, almost hysterical voice. Grace. Grace, for God's sake, can you help me? Hey. I had an accident, a serious problem, and I need someone who understands medicine. I feigned concern. My God, Ashley. What happened? Are you okay? I can't explain over the phone, it's too embarrassing. Can you come to my house? Please. It's a medical emergency and I don't know what to do anymore. Her voice was shaky, full of shame and desperation. I almost felt sorry. Almost. Of course, dear. I'll get my first aid kit and I'll be right there. Stay calm, everything will be okay, I replied, using my most professional and comforting tone. I hung up the phone and stood still for a few seconds, savoring the moment. After 30 years of being underestimated, disrespected and betrayed, it was finally my turn to be in control of the situation. I grabbed my nursing bag. I always kept one at home for neighborhood emergencies, and walked slowly to Ashley's house. Each step was calculated. I had all the time in the world now. I rang the doorbell and Ashley opened the door with a red face of shame and desperation. She was in a bathrobe, her hair disheveled, and had tears in her eyes. Grace, thank you for coming. Something very strange happened, an accident. She stammered, unable to look me in the eyes. Calm down, my dear. Tell Aunt Grace what happened. I've been a nurse for 35 years, there's nothing I haven't seen, I said, entering the house with complete tranquility. That's when I heard a familiar voice coming from upstairs. Ashley. Ashley, for God's sake, call someone. This isn't normal. Robert. My dear husband was up there, probably in the same embarrassing situation as Ashley. Feigned total surprise. Gosh, is there someone else here? I thought you lived alone. Ashley turned even redder. It's a friend who was visiting me. He also had the same problem. Grace, we used an intimate product and something bizarre happened. We got stuck. Literally stuck. I opened my bag with all the solemnity of a doctor examining a complex case. I understand. Did you use a different lubricant? Some new product? No. It was the same as always, the same brand. I don't understand what happened, she said desperately. I went upstairs behind her, each step giving me more pleasure than it should. Arriving at the bedroom, which I immediately recognized as the setting for the photos they sent each other, I found the most ridiculous and satisfying scene of my life. Robert was sitting on the edge of the bed, red with shame and clearly panicking. And stuck to him, in a way I won't describe in detail out of decency, was Ashley. They had tried to separate with such force that the skin was red and irritated around the problem area. Grace! Robert shouted when he saw me, his voice full of desperation and fear. Thank God you came. Something inexplicable happened. We can't get unstuck. I looked at them with my most professional expression, holding back the urge to smile. Well, this is really unusual. Are you sure you used regular lubricant? Absolutely, they answered in chorus, like a rehearsed couple. Then we'll have to call specialized help, I said, taking out my cell phone. This is going to need the fire department. No, they shouted together. Please no. There must be some other way. I shook my head negatively, assuming my role as a responsible professional. I'm sorry, but this is beyond my knowledge. I'll have to call the firefighters to make the separation safely. It's for your own good. And that's exactly what I did. I called the firefighters and explained the situation, omitting, of course, any detail that could incriminate me. Robert and Ashley looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and terror. They had no idea I knew everything. They had no idea I had been the cause of the accident. And mainly, they had no idea that the best was yet to come. Because when the firefighters arrived, half the neighborhood would come along to see what was happening, and the whole truth would come out. In 15 minutes, the sound of sirens echoed through the quiet street. I had been prepared for this moment for hours, but Robert and Ashley went into total panic. They begged me not to let anyone come upstairs, to make up any excuse. I agreed, of course, like the helpful neighbor I had always been. I went down to receive the firefighters at the door, explaining loudly, very loudly, what the situation was. 2 adults had an accident with an intimate product and got stuck. They'll need special equipment to separate them without injury. As expected on a small street like ours, windows began to open. Margaret, Ashley's mother, who had returned from her trip early, came running to the gate asking what was happening. The neighbors in the back came out on the porch. The neighbor across the street pretended to be watering plants, but was listening to every word. My God, is Ashley okay? What happened? Asked Margaret, clearly worried and confused. Stay calm, Margaret. Your daughter is fine, she just had an embarrassing accident with a young man who was visiting her, I explained with my most comforting nurse voice. The firefighters went upstairs with their equipment, special solvent, precision cutting instruments, first aid materials. It was quite an operation for a simple accident with lubricant. I stayed downstairs, controlling the situation and keeping the neighbors informed. Margaret insisted on going upstairs, but I convinced her it would be better to let the professionals work. Your daughter is going through a difficult time, Margaret. It's better to preserve her privacy. That's when I heard screams coming from upstairs. Robert yelling in pain when they tried to separate them one way, Ashley crying when they tried another. The surgical glue was doing exactly what I expected. Sticking for real, requiring technique and patience to remove without causing serious injury. For God's sake, what product did you use? I heard one of the firefighters asking. I don't know. It was regular lubricant, the same brand as always. Robert screamed, clearly in agony both physically and emotionally. 15 minutes later, more screams. Half an hour, more procedures. The neighbors started making comments. What a strange situation, huh? Never seen anything like it. Poor things, how embarrassing. That's when Margaret pulled me aside. Grace, tell me the truth. What young man is this who was with my daughter? Ashley didn't tell me she was dating anyone. I took a deep breath. This was the cue I had been waiting for. Margaret, I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but it's Robert. My husband, Robert. Her face went white. Your husband? But how so? That's right, Margaret. I discovered a few days ago that they've been having an affair for months. I was trying to decide what to do when this accident happened. Fate sometimes delivers justice with its own hands. Her voice went up a couple of tones. Robert? That Robert up there stuck to my daughter is your husband of 30 years. Unfortunately, yes, I replied with a choked voice, as if I were suffering greatly, which wasn't totally a lie. Margaret exploded. Ashley, get down here now. Calm down, Margaret, they can't come down. They're still stuck, I explained, holding her arm. That's when she shouted upstairs, loud enough for the whole street to hear. Ashley, are you up there with Grace's husband? The married man of 30 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Ashley's weak voice. Mom, I can explain. Explain what? That you're a home wrecker. At that moment, I finally allowed some tears to run down my face. Not from sadness, but from pure satisfaction. 30 years of humiliation were being avenged in a matter of minutes. All the neighbors listening, Margaret yelling at her daughter, Robert trapped in an embarrassing situation he could never explain convincingly. And there I was, the helpful nurse who was just trying to help in a medical emergency. The innocent victim of a betrayal that came to light in the worst possible way for the betrayers. The best part. The show was just beginning. An hour and a half later, the firefighters finally managed to separate the couple. Robert and Ashley came down the stairs like two teenagers being taken to the principal's office, heads down and clearly in pain, both physical and emotional. The affected area was red and irritated, and they could barely walk properly. Ashley's living room was full. Furious Margaret, 3 firefighters, 2 neighbors who came to help, and me, the betrayed wife who was there out of pure Christian kindness. At least that was the impression everyone had. They need to go to the hospital for a more detailed evaluation, said the fire chief. I've never seen such strong glue in an intimate product. We'll have to investigate this brand to prevent other accidents. That's when Robert looked me in the eyes for the first time since he'd come home early hours ago. There was something different in my gaze, and he seemed to notice. A shadow of suspicion crossed his face, but was soon replaced by the urgency of getting to the hospital. On the way to the emergency room, I went because I was the only health professional present. I sat in the front seat of the ambulance while Robert and Ashley went on the stretcher, still avoiding looking at each other in shame. Nurse, said the paramedic. In 15 years of profession, I've never seen anything like it. What product did they use? I'm curious too, I replied innocently. Robert, where did you buy that lubricant again? His panicked expression was priceless. I don't remember. It must have been at some pharmacy. Strange, I commented, as if I were really intrigued. You always buy at the same pharmacy near the shop. I'll call there later to warn them about the product problem. Arriving at the hospital, that's when the real show began. My work colleagues saw me arrive with that strange couple, and immediately approached to understand the situation. It was Dr. Martinez, with whom I had worked for years, who took the case. Grace, explain to me better what happened, he asked, while examining the two patients. Doctor, I discovered today that my husband has been cheating for months with this young woman here, Ashley. They had this embarrassing accident and called me to help since I'm a nurse. I explained with a firm voice, without a hint of shame. The doctor stopped what he was doing. Your husband? Cheating, and you helped them anyway? Doctor, I've been a healthcare professional for 35 years. I can't let anyone suffer, regardless of what they've done to me, I replied, now speaking loudly so other colleagues could hear. That's when I took out my cell phone. In fact, I have the proof of the betrayal here. Messages where they make jokes about me, plan to run away with my money, and even racist comments from Ashley about how older black women get hysterical when they're left. Nurse Carol, who was nearby, approached. He did what to you, Grace? I showed the messages to her and Dr. Martinez. The messages where Robert said I was boring, where Ashley called me pathetic and made comments about my hair and race. My God, Grace! And you still came to help them? Carol exclaimed, loud enough for the entire hospital to hear. You who are watching, especially those who have suffered racism or betrayal, know how important it is to have people who support us in these moments. If you know someone who went through a similar situation, share this video. Sometimes a story of overcoming can give strength to someone who needs it. Share to show that we shouldn't accept disrespect silently. Robert tried to defend himself. Grace, you don't understand, I can explain. Explain what, Robert? That you called our marriage a boring life. That you planned to run away with my money. That you let your mistress call me a hysterical black woman. I asked, my voice echoing through the hospital corridor. Other patients, nurses, doctors, everyone stopped to listen. Robert turned red with shame, Ashley started crying, and I finally felt in control of my own narrative. You know what's funniest? I continued, looking directly at Ashley. You called me stupid in your messages. But who was it that switched your lubricant for surgical glue? Who planned every detail of this public humiliation? The old stupid black woman you so underestimated. The silence in the hospital was total. Robert looked at me with a mixture of shock, fear, and respect. For the first time in 30 years, he was seeing who I really was. And I was just getting started. The silence in the hospital was broken by Robert's trembling voice. Grace! You did this on purpose? I smiled for the first time in days, a smile that wasn't of sadness or anger, but of pure satisfaction. Robert, in 35 years of saving lives, do you really think I wouldn't know the difference between lubricant and surgical glue? Dr. Martinez let out a low laugh. Grace, you're brilliant. Cyanoacrylate glue. Surgical precision for a situation that required exactly that. Precision. Ashley tried to get up from the stretcher. You're crazy. You hurt us on purpose. That's a crime. Crime, Ashley? I asked, approaching her with complete calm. You want to talk about crime? Let's talk then. I took out my cell phone again and showed everyone. Here are the transfers Robert made from our joint account over the last 3 months. $43,000 withdrawn little by little, without my knowledge. That's called embezzlement. Robert went pale. How did you, the account? The account that I've been managing for 30 years, Robert. The account where I deposit my entire salary every month, while you deposit only part of yours. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Dr. Martinez was impressed. Grace, did you document everything? Everything, doctor. Including the fact that, since last Monday, I transferred all the remaining amount to an individual account of mine. Robert, you're officially without a cent of what was ours. His desperate expression was better than any revenge I could have imagined. You can't do this. Half of that money is mine. It was yours, Robert. It was. But when you decided to plan an escape with your mistress using our money, you lost that right. And you know what else? I cancelled all the cards that were in your name too. Ashley started crying louder. My God, Robert, you said you had money saved. How are we going to run away now? Shut up, Ashley. Robert shouted, realizing she was confirming everything in front of witnesses. But I wasn't finished. Oh, and Robert, about the shop. Do you remember that when your partner died 5 years ago, who lent you money to buy his share was my sister? With a signed contract and everything. His face gradually lost color. Grace? No. That's right. I called her this morning. She wants the money back. With interest and adjustment. That's about $90,000. And since you don't have money in the account anymore. Dr. Martinez whistled softly. The shop. Exactly. The shop will have to be sold to pay the debt. Robert, you didn't just lose your wife and money. You also lost your job. At that moment, Nurse Carol approached with other colleagues who had come to watch the drama. Grace, girl, did you plan all this? Carol, do you know how many times I came here to the hospital after double shifts and still had to go home to cook, wash, iron, clean? How many times did you ask me why I didn't rest more, why I didn't travel, why I didn't take better care of myself? She shook her head. We always said you deserved better. That's right. And you were right. I spent 30 years being underestimated for being a woman, for being black, for being just a nurse. But do you know what this profession taught me? Strategy, precision, patience, and mainly, how to identify when something is sick and needs to be removed. I looked at Robert and Ashley. You were the disease in my life. And I just performed surgery to remove you. Robert tried one last card. Grace, we can talk, work this out at home like adults. Adults, Robert. Adults don't cheat. Adults don't lie. Adults don't make racist jokes about their own wives. And mainly, adults don't underestimate the intelligence of a 58-year-old woman who dedicated her entire life to saving people. I turned to leave, but before I looked at Ashley one last time. Oh, Ashley, about calling me a hysterical black woman. You were right about one thing, I really am black. But about being hysterical. Well, you just discovered the difference between hysteria and strategy. I left the hospital with my head held high, leaving behind 30 years of a life that was never really mine. And the best was yet to come. The next morning, I was in the office of Patricia Williams, a lawyer I met years ago when she was hospitalized after an accident. I took care of her throughout her recovery, and since then we've maintained a solid friendship. When I called explaining my situation, she canceled other appointments to see me immediately. Grace, did you document all of this? Asked Patricia, leafing through the printouts I brought. Messages, bank statements, photos, even recordings of the hospital conversations that a colleague made secretly. Everything, Patricia. 35 years of being a nurse taught me that documentation is fundamental for any procedure to work. She smiled. And the bank transfers? They might claim you acted in bad faith. Impossible. The account has always been managed by me, with his power of attorney signed since 2010. I have all the receipts showing that my full salary was always deposited there, while he deposited partial amounts. Legally, most of the money was mine anyway. And the racial issue. The prejudiced messages. I showed her screenshots of messages where Ashley made comments about hysterical black women, and where Robert agreed with jokes about my hair and appearance. This constitutes racial harassment, Patricia. And since it happened during the marriage, it makes his situation in the divorce even worse. Patricia spent 2 hours analyzing everything and reached the conclusion I already expected. Grace, with this material, we can get a lightning-fast contested divorce. Furthermore, you're entitled to considerable compensation for moral damages. And considering the house was bought mainly with your money, do I keep the house? The house, half the assets, alimony. Even though you earn well, he'll have to pay for the damages caused. And on top of that, he could face criminal charges for embezzlement and she for racial harassment. 3 weeks later, Robert showed up at home, our former home, which was now just mine, with a suitcase in hand and his tail between his legs. He lost in court on all fronts. The judge was ruthless when analyzing the evidence. Grace, we need to talk, he said, standing at the living room door. We have nothing to talk about, Robert. You have half an hour to get your personal things. The rest stays. Grace, please. I know I messed up, but 30 years can't end like this. I stopped folding my new clothes, I had renewed my entire wardrobe and looked him in the eyes. 30 years, Robert? You want to talk about the 30 years I spent being invisible in my own house? The 30 years serving your family while they treated me like a maid? The 30 years you silently accepted every racist comment about me? He lowered his head. I never realized it was that bad. Didn't realize or didn't want to realize. 'Cause there's a difference, Robert. A big difference. He tried to approach. What if I change? What if we start over? Start over. I laughed, but it wasn't a bitter laugh. It was the laugh of someone who was finally free. Robert, do you really think that after discovering who I really am, strategic, intelligent, capable of planning and executing perfect revenge, do you really think I would go back to being that submissive woman from before? His expression changed. For the first time, I saw something I had never seen in 30 years. Respect. And fear. You've changed, Grace. No, Robert. I was always like this. You just never paid attention. The difference is that now I don't hide who I am anymore to avoid bothering anyone. He packed his things in silence. When he was leaving, he turned one last time. What about Ashley? What about her? Did you two work things out? I smiled. Ashley learned a valuable lesson about underestimating 58-year-old black women. She won't make that mistake again. And if she does, well, I have other recipes in my pharmacy. Robert left my life as he entered, without making much noise. The difference was that this time I was the one in control of the situation. And for the first time in decades, the house was silent not because I was ignored, but because it was finally just mine. 2 months after the divorce, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. I had cut my hair at a salon specializing in natural hair. For the first time in my life, without straightening, without blow-drying, without trying to tame my curls. It was natural, powerful, beautiful. It was in my hair the way God made it. At work, the change was even more notable. Dr. Martinez called me for a conversation that would change everything. Grace, we need a new nursing supervisor. Someone with experience, leadership and... Well, let's say your recent performance showed that you have strategic qualities we underestimated. I laughed. Doctor, are you offering me a promotion because you discovered I know how to use surgical glue creatively? No, Grace. I'm offering because in 35 years you've always been the most competent nurse we've had, but you never applied for leadership positions. Now I understand why. You were spending all your energy being submissive at home. The promotion came with a significant salary increase, more flexible hours and, mainly, recognition. For the first time, doctors consulted me about protocols, junior nurses came to ask for advice, and my opinion really mattered in hospital decisions. With the divorce money and my new salary, I did things I had dreamed of for decades. I traveled to New Orleans to experience jazz culture, went to Atlanta to visit a cousin I hadn't seen in 15 years, took a cruise through the Caribbean. On each trip, I posted photos on Instagram. I created my own account, and likes came from colleagues amazed at my new life. But the biggest change wasn't external. It was how people saw me now. On the street, neighbors who barely greeted me before stopped to chat. The story of how Nurse Grace taught her cheating husband a lesson had spread throughout the city. I became an urban legend. Grace, called Margaret one morning when I was leaving for work. She approached with an unfriendly expression. We need to talk. Of course, Margaret. How is Ashley? Ashley is living with her aunt in Jacksonville. She can't show her face in this city anymore after the episode. That's a shame, I replied without a hint of remorse in my voice. Grace, you planned everything, didn't you? From the beginning. I looked into her eyes. Margaret, I discovered I was being betrayed and humiliated for months. I just used my professional knowledge to resolve the situation. You destroyed my daughter. No, Margaret. Your daughter destroyed herself when she chose to have an affair with a married man and still make racist jokes about his wife. I just accelerated the consequences of the choices she made. Margaret was silent for a few seconds. You've changed a lot, Grace. I haven't changed, Margaret. I just stopped accepting disrespect silently. She walked away shaking her head, but before entering her house she turned. You know what? Maybe Ashley deserved it after all. At work, during lunch break, I was having coffee when Dr. Eduardo, a cardiologist who had always treated me with respect, approached. Grace, can I ask a personal question? Of course, doctor. Are you available for dinner? I mean, as adults, no rush, just to get to know each other better. For the first time in months, I felt nervous in a good way. Dr. Eduardo, Yes. I'd love to have dinner with you. Great. And Grace? Yes. You can just call me Eduardo. I think it's time we were less formal, don't you think? I smiled in a way I hadn't smiled in years. In a way I had forgotten I knew how to smile. At 58, I was rediscovering that Grace wasn't just a dedicated nurse or a betrayed ex-wife. Grace was an intelligent, strategic, beautiful and powerful woman who had spent 3 decades hidden behind a marriage that never valued her. And the best part, I was just beginning to truly live. 6 months later, I was at the altar of a small chapel, wearing a royal blue dress that enhanced my skin and natural hair that I now wore with pride. On the other side, Eduardo was waiting for me with the most genuine smile I had ever seen. At 62, he was a widower for 4 years, a respected doctor, and mainly a man who from the first date treated me as an equal. Grace, he said in our first serious conversation, I want you to know that I admire your strength, your intelligence, your strategy for getting out of a humiliating situation. You are inspiring. Inspiring. No one had ever called me inspiring. During the wedding preparations, the second of my life but the first real one, I received an unexpected message on WhatsApp. It was from Ashley. Grace, I know I have no right to contact you, but I need to talk. May I? I hesitated, but my curiosity spoke louder. Go ahead. I want to apologize. Not just for the affair, but for the racist comments, for the way I treated you, for participating in the humiliations. You didn't deserve any of that. And what made you realize this, Ashley? Life, Grace. When I left here, I went to live with my aunt in Jacksonville. I got a job in a store, met different people. And a coworker, an older black woman named Rosa, gave me lessons I'll never forget. I continued reading, curious. She told me, Girl, you humiliated a woman who dedicated her whole life to taking care of people. You thought she was weak because she was kind. You confused kindness with stupidity. And look what happened. Grace, she was right. You were always strong, I was just too ignorant to realize it. And Robert? Do you still talk? Robert showed up here last month, broke, unemployed, wanting to get back together. Do you know what I told him? I can't imagine. I said that if he couldn't value a woman like you in 30 years, what chance would he have with me? I sent him away, Grace. He's living in a rented room, doing odd jobs as a mechanic. And alone. I closed the phone and reflected. Revenge no longer gave me pleasure. What gave me pleasure was my new life, my recovered identity, my rebuilt self-esteem. At the wedding, Dr. Martinez gave the best man speech. I knew Grace as an exceptional nurse. But only recently did I discover that behind that impeccable professional was an extraordinary woman waiting for the right time to show her true strength. Eduardo, you're not just gaining a wife. You're gaining a strategic, intelligent, and loyal partner. After the ceremony, while we danced our first song as a couple, Eduardo told me, Grace, can I make a confession? I always admired you at the hospital, but never had the courage to show interest because you seemed unreachable. Always serious, always focused. It was because I was living a life that wasn't mine, Eduardo. I spent all my energy pretending to be someone I wasn't. And now? Who are you now? I looked around. My hospital colleagues dancing and laughing, Eduardo's family treating me like a queen, neighbors who now truly respected me, and mainly, myself feeling complete for the first time in my life. Now I'm the Grace who always existed, but was hidden for 30 years. I'm a nurse, strategist, intelligent, strong, and mainly, I know exactly my worth. You who are watching this far, especially you women who have felt invisible in your own relationships, who have been underestimated for being too gentle or too submissive. Subscribe to this channel and leave your own stories of overcoming in the comments. Tell how you discovered your inner strength, how you turned things around when you seemed defeated. Because this story isn't just mine. It's for all of us who once confused being good with being foolish, who thought love meant accepting crumbs, who allowed our kindness to be interpreted as weakness. The truth is that kindness was never weakness. Patience was never stupidity. And underestimating a woman who dedicates her life to caring for others is the biggest mistake anyone can make. Because when she decides to take care of herself, there's no force in the world that can stop her. Today, at 59, newly married, promoted, respected, and mainly happy, I finally understood the difference between being submissive and being strategic. Between accepting disrespect and choosing your battles. Robert and Ashley gave me the greatest gift of their lives. They forced me to discover who I really was. And for that, paradoxically, I'm grateful to them. Because the grace of today wouldn't exist without the humiliation that yesterday's grace went through. And this woman I am now. This woman no one will underestimate ever again. Never again. If you enjoyed this story of overcoming and intelligent revenge, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and mainly, share your own stories of how you turn things around in the comments. Because when women support each other, we are invincible. See you in the next video, and always remember, kindness is not weakness, it's choice. And a strong woman doesn't scream, she acts.